Hello, Service Goodsyke. Welcome back to the podcast. He has a bird. I am your host, Sean Shelton. I am here with my father, the AFL mascot expert, which means we are doing the semifinals, the long-awaited semifinals of the of AFL Team Name Rumble. Pops, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me, Sean. It's always good to see you and talk to you, and looking forward to the semifinals.
Good. We've talked briefly before we started recording, and he has been hard at work, and I'm excited for you guys to hear what some of the stuff he's come up with. But a quick justification of his expertise. In the past, I've read off a couple of his passages. So if you're new to the AFL Team Name Rumble, throughout my Raiders career, my dad has sent me motivational messages, but based in the city or the team name of the team that we're playing, which has forced him in over 80 plus games now, 90 games. It's forced him to do a lot of research about the team names, and that's why he is the expert. And just a quick example of what I mean. This is a message for the Vikings that you sent me. I don't remember when, actually. The end of the Viking Age. Like quite a lot of history's great civilizations, the reign of the Vikings eventually came to an end. Some historians attribute Norris' decline to burnout and overtraining. Others argue they simply couldn't compete with the rapid expansion of the Swarkerators Tyrol throughout Europe. Another theory points out the Vikings competed in various scattered leagues as opposed to just focusing on the AFL. That must have been early in my Raiders career.
Yes.
In doing so, they eventually fully assimilated into the lower levels of American football. What's for certain, though, is that the Vikings began to fade away after the Austrian invasion of Sean Poppyson in 2015 AD. So that was just a quick little brief one. Sometimes they were much longer. And obviously it's exaggerated and very, very biased because he is my father. The Vikings still play very, very good football. But that is an example of the research that he would types of research he would do and messages he would send before games. That one was about the least bias I could find. That was probably the tamest.
Well, in those messages, I was biased, of course.
Yes,
but in the AFL, team name Rumble, I am not biased.
Absolutely not.
No bias.
Absolutely
so
not.
I have taken all that bias and I have shelved it for this tournament.
Good. So a quick recap of how both these teams got to the semifinals. The Giants completely overwhelmed the Rangers, even though the Rangers were well equipped with six-shooting revolvers and rifles. The sheer size, strength, and brute force of the Giants was just completely overwhelming for the Rangers. And in the Vikings Steel Sharks semifinal, which was pretty controversial, the Vikings Berserkers mainly had their way with the Steel Sharks in regards to their battle axes being able to split metal. Now, a good point was steel is stronger than molded or forged metal, but Steel Sharks get a real mascot. Maybe we can find a better solution. I don't know. So, so both of these teams had very, very strong performances in the quarterfinals, and this sets up to be a very, very, very competitive semifinal. So a quick recap of how we define giants. A giant is a around 4 meter tall human being, not the brightest, but extremely violent, extremely aggressive, and extremely strong. Does that about sum it up, Pops?
Yeah. I think that sums up the Giants pretty well.
Yeah. And on the other side, we had Vikings, who are notorious soldiers. And we had 3 of them, which were even a higher classification or elite, if you will, Viking soldiers called berserkers. Berserkers were usually intoxicate themselves before battle and become enraged and charge, and had mainly wore no type of armor, used a battle axe, was known to split shields and split helmets. And then you had 8 normal Vikings, which were also elite soldiers. It was a culture that bred soldiers because they took hand-to-hand combat very, very seriously. And yeah, like I said, they, because of those skills and the brute force of the berserkers, they were able to manhandle basically the steel sharks. Did I leave anything out for the Vikings, Pops?
No, I think you're right. They were all good warriors. Even the women, the shield maidens were good warriors. And I think the berserkers, when consuming mushrooms, generally is what they did prior to a battle, would lead the charge and really intimidate the other army and the other soldiers. And obviously, probably the sharks didn't really care that much, but we put a lot of emphasis on the two-handed battle axe and the ability to come down, on the sharks, and the sharks' ability, sharks being a fish out of water, basically, and not having the ability to come up underneath the prey,
right?
Which is the way they normally would hunt. Put them at a big disadvantage. So there was some controversy. How could how could steel sharks lose? But I think, and it gets back to, they were a fish out of water.
Correct. So, I guess one nugget to throw in there, that the Vikings are probably outside of the Blue Devils, the Vikings are probably the only other unit that is actually military strategic, or has a military mind. The Giants, Dragons, and Raiders aren't known for their military expertise, but the Vikings actually were, which is a bit foreshadowing. So moving into this semifinal, Father, you've had 2 weeks to research.
Yes, and I have put in a lot of intensive work, many hours.
Correct. So enlighten us for what you've come up with your research prior to the battle.
Well, I looked at the Giants probably didn't do any preparation, right? I mean, they just, they're finishing off whatever the leftovers were from the Rangers, and are fat, dumb, and happy, and just ready to have another battle. So I don't think they did a whole lot. But I looked at the Vikings, and I looked at Coach Chris and his staff, and all the work that they do in prep, and they had an extra week to prepare for this matchup. And I am giving Coach Chris and his staff a lot of credit that they did a lot of homework and went out and tried to determine, okay, how are all the different ways known to man to defeat a giant?
Real quick, though, this is not an indication that the Gratz Giants do not have a good coaching staff. It's more so that the Vikings historically are also strategic, unlike Giants.
True. No, okay, I'm just, good. I mean, in this particular case, we're not talking about Graz Giants football players. We're talking about Graz Giants.
Correct. Okay.
Period. If you're the head coach of just a group of mythical giants, you're probably not, for one thing, they're not even going to understand a game plan or any plays or anything like that. So just wanted to clarify. No derogatory indication to the AFL Giants coaching staff. No.
Good. So what would Chris and his staff come up with and to help lead their Vikings?
Well, I looked at, and like I said, when my many hours of research, and used my research team, here in Arkansas.
Your team.
My team.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what we came up with, there was like 7 ways historically to either defeat a giant, kill the giant, or just render them useless, or where they wouldn't be wanting to fight anymore. So I came up with 7 different ways.
And how many of those are applicable and for the Vikings to actually use in this Rumble?
Well, that's a really good question, because considering, I mean, you're the commissioner of this league and you always kind of set ground rules before uh, every contest.
Mm-hmm.
I have to ask you two questions, because there were two ways historically Giants were killed that I don't think will work for Coach Chris and his team in this game, because
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have them on a field. So let's just get that out right now. There's no cliffs in your stadium, right? There's no cliff.
Oh,
There's no, because there were some giants. Magog was a English giant that was killed by throwing him off a cliff. No cliffs in the stadium.
no,
No
no,
cliffs on this field, right?
no cliffs.
And also no beanstalks.
Also, no beanstalks.
Okay, we'll see that. So there were 9 ways,
Okay.
but I think that there's 7 that Coach Chris and the Vikings could perhaps use.
Okay. Can you run them?
in this matchup?
Run us through those. Real quick.
Well, one of them is they need to get a hold of Medusa's head.
Okay.
Medusa was a gorgon and had the snakes, for hair. And if anyone looked at it, anything looked at her face, they turned to stone. So the Greek hero Perseus used Medusa's severed head, to take out Atlas, which is the giant that was supposedly holds the world up, and also took a dragon out. So then there's some discussion which coaching staff got a hold of Medusa's head first. Was it the Vikings coaching staff or the Raiders coaching staff?
I'm having a feeling that.
Or would they share? They get along so well. Would they share Medusa's head?
I'm also just thinking that neither were able to gather that resource.
Okay, so that's off the table. No Medusa's head.
No, the Raiders from Tyrol and the Vikings from Vienna, but neither which, being of Greek mythology, probably wouldn't have had access.
Okay, so no Medusa's head. So the other would be, a lot of the giants, were known to only have one eye, being Cyclops. And you brought up in the battle with the giants and the Rangers about the Cyclops that Odysseus, the Greek warrior, took out. So let's I'm going to say, and that's where you have to make the ruling, could potentially some of the giants only have one eye, the Graz giants.
I think that's fair.
There's also Irish giants that don't have one eye. So so
I think
one
that's
way
fair.
is just take the eye out. If they take the eye out, even if it doesn't kill them, it basically renders them useless in the game. So how many? I guess that's the question. How many giants would you say have one eye?
I think that's fair. I think Cyclops was scattered throughout mythology just as much as giants. They're pretty commonplace.
Yeah.
So, the percentage off the top of my head would be a quarter, would you say?
Okay. So you'd say what? 3?
3?
3 giants have, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
What would be the percentage that you think when doing your research on giants, of how many that you stumbled across that were Cyclopses?
I mean, in my research, I found there was the Greek giants that had one eye, and also Irish giants.
Okay.
So I think a
but
quarter
giants,
or.
But giants are world, like you said. Every culture in the world had giants. So
has giants, right?
So 25 seems fine. So 25, 3 of them are Cyclopses.
Okay, so three are Cyclops. The other thing that's interesting, in Norse mythology, which is very appropriate for the giants, Thor, the god of thunder, used his hammer.
Oh God!
To hammer to take out a giant, and I've seen in pregame celebrations that the Vienna Vikings do have a Thor's hammer.
They do. I can't say no, because they literally run on the field with it every single game.
So they have a hammer.
They have a hammer.
That's something that they can use. So they have a hammer. Also, getting back to biblical stories of Goliath, David took Goliath out with a slingshot.
Yep.
So that's something that I think that the coaching staff could easily outfit the Vikings with slingshots.
Very true, but the Norse Vikings were not known to use slingshots, and if that is a weakness, the eye is the weakness, then the spears that they use should be sufficient. I would say they are not known to use projectile weapons.
Well, the slingshot would give them a little more distance maybe than the spear.
True.
That's the only thought. You can probably
have the
hurl a rock farther than you could throw a spear.
True.
But I don't know with what accuracy though.
Right. Have the Vikings been known to use any type of projectile weapons in fighting?
No.
No. So I say we're 2 for 2. So no Medusa's head, no slingshots. But they get Thor's hammer, so let's go. Come on.
Okay. Well, yeah. See what I'm giving Coach Chris and his staff credit is that they're going to be creative and come up with some different ways, different game plan than normal. They don't normally use slingshots, but they have 2 weeks to acquire slingshots in practice.
No.
No slingshot. Okay. The commissioner's tough on this game. Hey. Also, in Japanese mythology, they had giants called Oni, O-N-I, Oni. And the only thing they found that worked with them is throwing soybeans at them. And the soybean, it wouldn't kill them, but they didn't like the soybeans, and so it would scare them off. So, but the question and this I don't know, you're going to tell me on this. What's the soybean situation like in Austria? I mean, we have soybeans here in the U.S., but I don't know about Austria.
We have soybeans as well, but I'm not so sure if they're imported. I don't know the origins of soybeans. Or
could Coach
hold on real quick.
Chris and Steph get their hands on a large quantity of soybeans?
That's a good question. I need to phone a friend, call an expert. Sweetie, does Austria grow soybeans? They have soybeans. We have soybeans.
Okay.
Thanks, sweetie.
Yeah. So they have access to soybeans. It worked on Japanese giants. These are Graz giants, Austrian giants. So, but they do have soybeans.
They get soybeans.
So they get soybeans. In Hindu myths, they decided they couldn't beat the giants, so they just get them drunk to a point where the giants wouldn't be capable of fighting or not wanting to fight, losing the will to fight. So could the Vienna Vikings have alcohol in the field, or is that against probably AFL rules?
I think alcohol. Probably not before the match, but a beer is pretty customary after the match. But Austria,
but like during a match,
they are allowed to have beer if they're able to have the amount of consumption that a giant would need to have to be inebriated is probably not realistic, anyways.
Would take too much time.
Fun fact: Austria is a pioneer with regards to soybean cultivation in the EU. With only 2% of the total EU agricultural surface, Austria produces 8% of the total EU soybeans.
Who knew?
Now you know.
Yeah. See, you got to give Coach Chris and his staff credit.
Yeah.
They turned over every rock, Sean. Before this game.
Yeah, but they get what they have readily available, which is soybeans and beer.
Okay, so they do get beer.
They do get beer.
Okay. And number 7, the last was the goddess Diana. And if you didn't give him Medusa's head, I don't think you're going to give him the help of goddess Diana.
Probably. No, probably not.
Okay, so let's just recap. They can take there's 3 Cyclops.
Correct.
On the Graz Giants 11-man roster.
Correct.
And they have the capability with spears to take out those eyes.
Correct.
Okay. They do have Thor's hammer.
Correct.
So they have Thor's hammer. You ruled out slingshots.
No slingshots. Right?
No slingshots. You're going to give them soybeans.
Soybeans.
Austria is a soybean powerhouse in the EU.
Apparently.
And you're going to give them alcohol, and that's it.
Correct. And should we do a brief recap of outside of those things what equipment a Viking does have normally?
Yeah, I think that.
And what type of personnel are we talking about for the Vikings?
Well, see, in this particular case, I don't think that Coach Chris puts his berserkers on the field.
Okay.
Because I think now you're not looking, you're not really looking to attack. so much, which which, like I said, the Vikings, would attack if they were raiding and pillaging. But now this is a battle, and they were, as you pointed out earlier, they did fight army. They did fight battles. They had armies. They had the great heathen army that almost conquered all of England, and they were very strategic. So I think the berserkers are on the sidelines, because if you charge 3 berserkers into the charging giants,
yeah.
I think it just they lose that. So I think the berserkers are on the sidelines.
Okay.
Drinking beer and snacking on soybeans, and I think you have 11 of the smartest, like skill players. So on this, you want the smartest Vikings, the fastest, quickest, most agile skill players. So I think you would be mostly receiver, running back, defensive back type players.
Gotcha.
You'd probably want your quarterback on the sideline on this one too, because they're generally not the most
what do you
athletic.
Say?
No, I'm not saying anything.
Okay.
But anyway, so I think that would be so his smartest best athletes are on the field,
and they're equipped with shields and spears normally.
Shields, spears. They also use swords.
Yep.
They also had axes. For
Correct.
close. So the spears were more
middle distance
to either throw or to fend off a charge from a opposing army, and then in close combat they're going to use their swords and axes.
Okay.
And shields, and they have shields.
Exactly. And then on the other side, you just have 3 giant, strong, angry, dumb, 11 angry, dumb, strong, big giants, 3 of which have 1 eye.
3 of which have 1 eye.
Okay. So now that we've laid out the foundation of the battle, how would you hypothesize the battle beginning?
Well, I was hoping you would give the Vikings some more weapons, especially some of the Greek weapons, which I thought would be, how would they have used
Medusa's head?
What?
How would they have used Medusa's head? Just turn
stone? They'd have pulled it out, and any giant that would look at it would have turned to stone.
Okay.
But they don't have Medusa's head, so we'll move forward. But
okay.
What I envision, they line up and they take, to start out with, you have them both on the 35-yard line, right? The Giants and the Vikings are on the 35-yard line.
Exactly. If you're new to the AFL team name Rumble, we have 11 and 11 on a field, an American football-sized field arena. Those walls all around the field is 120 yards long, and they line up at the 35-yard line. Whistle blows, go.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to last long. It's not going to be a long battle, but I would envision that Coach Chris would take his 3 best spearmen or spear throwers, right? Mm-hmm. And he would, when the Giants lined up, he would line up his 3 best spear throwers across from the 3 Cyclops.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I think then the rest of the Vikings would just line up, and each of the Viking would have a 6-pack on them probably, and a pouch with soybeans, and then I think you'd have probably one of the stronger Vikings using the Thor's hammer. There's only one Thor's hammer,
right? Exactly.
So one guy's got the Thor's hammer. So
I could envision.
I think that's the way they kind of line up. One guy's got the Thor's hammer. Everybody's got their spears out, mm-hmm. but the 3 best spear throwers are lined up across from the Cyclops.
Gotcha.
3 Cyclops.
And how do you imagine them using the beer? Are they just gonna lay it down and kind of back up and hopefully the Giants get distracted, or how do you envision them implementing the beer?
That's a really good question. I guess just not putting a lot of thought into it. I guess they would try to throw, and then maybe you want a quarterback out there, because I think you try to throw the beer into the Giants' mouths and hope that they consume it.
Okay.
I mean, the Giants are going to stop there and say, "Hey, let's pop one open and let's
not
toast.
Not when they become enraged. Probably not.
No, maybe I think you have your choice would be, and like I said, maybe you want to throw a quarterback out there.
Yeah.
That can throw precision passing of beer cans.
Well,
right.
I'm sure he's
Giants'
on the
mouths.
field because he's probably one of the best spear throwers. So.
Okay, that's
11 on
true.
11.
Okay,
The three best spear throwers are across from the three best are the three Cyclopses. Whistle
right.
blows. What happens?
I think the Giants charge, but the Vikings are, are wait and are patient and let them get into range before they launch the spears. I think they want to make sure that those shots count.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say that the Vikings wait till the three Cyclops get close enough and launch their spears, and their spears head home, and they blind the three Giants.
Okay, so
Which
they
at
were
that
3 for
point,
3. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So let's give them that. So there's the three Giants are still, they're not dead,
Mm-hmm.
but they're blinded, right? So that's going to kind of, they don't really know where to go at that point, and and pretty much been taken out of the match. So now you're down to what, eight Giants.
Mm-hmm.
But the best spear throwers have also used their spears, so they no
Correct.
longer have those spears. So now they're preparing for close contact. So I think that the other Vikings also throw their spears, but even if they got it in one eye, they're not Cyclops anymore, right? They still have an eye,
Correct.
and if they hit the Giant, it's not going to do much damage. So they
Mm-hmm.
throw their spears, the Giants keep coming.
Okay.
And I think after they throw the spears, then the Viking sideline is saying, hey, start throwing beers. Throw the beers next.
Throw the soybeans. Do you think the
Yeah,
soybeans would have any
and then
effect?
the what?
The soybeans, what kind of effect
No,
would they have?
no, I
Okay.
don't. No, I think that they're not Japanese Giants, and these Giants will go, what in the hell? What are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you throwing? I'll pick up the beers later, and after the match is over. But why are you throwing soybeans at me?
Okay, so we have three Cyclopses who are blinded, three Vikings who have hit home with their spears. The other 8 Vikings have also thrown their spears, maybe wounded the Giant, but nothing
Wounded, yeah.
serious. And then you have the Vikings being pelted with soybeans to no effect. The beer at this point is probably not interesting for the Giants. So you have 11 Vikings, one with a Thor hammer, and 8 Giants who are still able to see. And
Right.
as the Giants close space, I imagine that's a disadvantage for the Vikings.
Yes, I think after the beer has been thrown and the soybeans have been thrown, normally what Vikings would do when an opposing army is charging, they do what they refer to a technique called the shield wall.
Okay.
Where they would all group close together with their shields up and but they've already thrown their spears, so they don't have spears anymore. But they would create the shield wall to try to take on that force of the Giants' charge, and have their spears out. Swords. So they'd have their shield wall with swords.
Yeah.
Waiting for the Giants to crash into that shield wall.
Exactly. Anybody who's seen the movie 300 knows exactly what he's talking about.
Shield wall.
Yeah.
So they have shield wall, and each guy's protecting the guy next to him, and Correct. They have the swords. But if you think about it, the Giants are going to run right through the shield wall. And poorly for the Vikings, right. I thought they'd put up their shield wall and hope to inflict some more damage as the Giants hit the shield wall with their swords.
Mm-hmm.
But then after that, I think it's every man for himself. And the Giants have penetrated the shield wall, and now the Vikings are every man for themselves, and the Giants are trying to chase down the individual Vikings. The fastest Vikings will last a little bit longer than the slower Vikings. But they've lost their shields, they've lost their swords, they've lost their spears, they have an axe left, which once again I think they're just wounding. All they can really do is wound the Giants, the 8 that are left,
right?
And I think that the 8 probably gather up some Vikings and even take them over to the poor 3 blinded Cyclopses and let them have some fun too.
How did the Viking with the Thor hammer do?
I think that the Viking with the Thor hammer, tried to use it, valiantly, but he's not Thor. right?
Yeah.
So he hit, he put a blow into the chest or torso of a giant, and the giant kind of just kept coming.
That's a good point.
I mean, it wasn't just the Thor's hammer, right? It was Thor was a god, was the god of thunder, and so him utilizing it was big too. So I think just
Correct.
having a Viking use a replica of Thor's hammer, that the one that they carry out in the field, probably didn't do a whole lot.
Yeah, I think the one thing that is really hard for the opponents of the Giants is Giants typically aren't known to be in packs of 11, correct? Like typically Giants are kind of lone rangers or in small groups, I
Solitary.
guess. Yeah, in small
Yeah,
groups
mostly
sometimes.
on their own. Yeah,
Right. So
mostly on their own.
when you put 11 on the field together, that's a pretty it's a pretty formidable opponent.
It is, and maybe your only hope would be to utilize what you just said and get them to perhaps turn on themselves.
Yeah.
Do something. Like I said, you're gonna beat them by being outsmarting, right?
Hmm.
So if you could do something that would get them to, but I think they're not really operating as a team anyway. They're all just charging straight down the field, and the first thing, the first opponent they run into, they just tear
Right.
apart. So
Right.
it's not like you're asking them to work together to orchestrate a very
Hmm.
elaborate play or something. You're
Hmm.
just saying charge down the field, and whoever gets in your way, take them out, and we'll all meet in the end zone.
Right. Uh, do you think Coach Chris's decision to go with a smaller, more quick and intelligent crew was the right one? How do you think the Berserkers would have fared if we would have left 3 Berserkers on the field?
I think it was the right choice, because I just think the Berserkers, would have been out of their minds on mushrooms, and probably think that they could take the Giants and charge in there and be taken out really quickly.
Okay.
I mean, I think if you put a Berserker mano a mano on a giant,
Not going to go well.
and I don't think the Giants going to be intimidated either. I mean, part of the reasons the Berserkers were so effective was they would just scare the hell out of the English troops or whoever they were attacking. It would be where I don't think they have that advantage when it comes to the Giants. I think the Giants are like, well, why are you running at me? I'm going to just, you're making my life easier.
Right.
Please come to Papa. Come here, and I'll, I don't have to chase you down.
So
I think the faster Vikings just prolong it, right?
Mhm.
They're having to chase them throughout the stadium to finally get them, and then it just makes the contest last a little longer. But
Yeah.
I think the Berserkers are just no match for a 12 to 15 foot giant.
Gotcha. So
Who's very similar to being a natural berserker, right? They don't have to take mushrooms and get hopped up and think they're invincible. They already do.
yeah. Yeah. So another demonstration of just brute aggression and brute force and brute size takes the victory.
Yeah, I think Coach Chris and the Vikings, did everything they could. I mean, if you would have given them Medusa's head, it might have helped. They maybe turn some giants into stones, or if they'd have had Diana on the field and was, a goddess. But without that, I think they did everything they could. The soybeans, the beer, the fake Thor's hammer, everything they could possibly think of, they tried to do. So you got to give them credit. But at the end of the day, they had 12 humans going against, 11 humans going against 11 giants, and I think that's gonna be a problem.
Yeah,
and was a problem.
So Giants stamped their ticket to the AFL team name Rumble. They are going to play or face the winner of the Dragons or Raiders. So congratulations to the Giants. Well deserved. You guys are a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, and Giants coaching staff, well done. We, like I said, we don't want to. We talked a lot about the Vikings coaching staff, but I think the Giants coaching staff are utilizing their strengths, right, and not having
when you have the talent, you just get out of the way.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So yeah, congratulations to the Giants.
Yeah, Father, thanks again for your expertise.
No problem.
This was fun as always. And until next time, until Monday, be Raiders Dragons. Thanks again, Pops.
Okay, no problem, Sean. It was fun. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye bye.